So to understand the zero waste concept, we're going to make it out of paper first. With your paper vertically, fold it in half and then half again. Cut it in half again and fold the two pieces in half so they will look like a sleeve. And then all I've done is I've turned it over and I've taped the sleeves down so that you can understand this is what your kimono is going to look like. And I'll insert a clip here for you to see it. When we turn our paper around, it starts to look a lot like the photograph of the kimono that we've just seen. The final piece that we've got now is going to become the waist tie. If you don't want to use it as a waist tie, you could actually use it as patch pockets. I'm just going to sellotape the pieces together and it's going to become my waist tie. So I've added a link down in the description to a free patch pocket and a free inseam pocket that I drafted. So feel free to print that off at your leisure and use that for this garment. So for the inseam pocket, you would add it now before you sew up the side seams. Let's move on and make it for real now. Check the description for the list of items that I use to make my kimono. First things first, just like we did with the A4 sheet of paper, we're going to perform the same exercise and the exact same folds. And to seal the folds, I press everything. Just like before, we're going to open the fabric out. You can see I've got it face up because I like to see what's happening. And we're going to cut down the centre, just like we did on the A4 sheet of paper, to separate the two pieces. Then fold it in half and cut down the centre of the top piece only. Just like we did before, we're making the entry point for the kimono. Or how we're going to get in it, basically. So as you can see, this is going to become the front, and I'm just going to turn it round a little bit and straight all the fabric out. Just so it's all nice and tidy. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut some little V's, some just little release snips into the fabric where the collar is. So these are the little release snips, and the release snips are about 1 centimetre on each side, and all it does is it just opens the collar because the fabric is tight there in that section, so it just opens the collar to release any tension. Now, because we've been moving the fabric around, you will find that the folds that you've made and ironed so carefully will now start to fade out. So it's a good idea to use a pin just to mark out the area, or some tailor's chalk or a snip with your shears, just to mark out the area where the sleeves are going to go, so that you know exactly where the sleeves are going to be inserted into the kimono, just like I'm doing here. So whilst we're looking at the kimono, let's discuss fabrics. So when you're making the kimono, it works best in any type of fabric, specifically if it's a two-way print, because you will, as you can imagine, the kimono, the print will be facing the right direction front ways, but if it's a one-way, it'll be facing the wrong direction on the back. So when it's a two-way print, that works best because it can face any direction. Okay, fold your fabric up. We're going to start working on a different piece now. We're going to think about the sleeves and the collar. Same thing that we did with the paper maquette that we made. We're going to fold it in half lengthways, and we're going to cut it along the centre. And this piece we're going to cut along the centre is going to become the collar, and the other piece will become the sleeves. So with the final piece that you've got, we're going to fold that one in half, and we're going to cut it to make the sleeves. You should already have the halfway mark from when you pressed all the folds in. So from this point, you've got all your fabrics prepared now. The main focus will be for you to think about how you're going to finish all the seams. So you've utilise the selve edge, because that's not a raw seam, but the cut edge will be a raw seam, and I would think about how you're going to finish that. You've got options there where you could bias it or use other seam finishes to protect the seam and prevent the fabric from fraying. So on my desk we can see the pieces of fabric all cut and prepared, ready for me to sew. I've got the body, the front and back body. I've also got two sleeves. I've also got the collar, and I've got the narrow piece, which is the waist tie. And I'm ready to start sewing now. I'm ready to start the construction process. And to finish my seams, I've decided I'm going to bias all the inside of the seams, just so that they've got a nice clean finish. First thing we're going to work on is the sleeves. So match the centre seams up. The centre seams become the shoulder seam of the sleeve head. Match those up and put your sleeve right sides to the right side of the body of the kimono and pin. So I had lots of pins all the way along the seam line, just to make sure that the fabric is in place, and I also want to make sure that the fabric's not going to move when I start sewing it. So what I do is where the seams match on the shoulder seam, I add a horizontal pin, because that tells me that's the halfway mark, and then to hold the rest of the sleeve in place, I use vertical pin. And what I do is when I start sewing from the middle and I work outwards, and that way I know that the fabric's not going to move. And it also reinforces the shoulder seam for me as well. So that's just a little tip for you there. So this is what the sleeve looks like when it's all set in and stitched together. And what I also do is I will press the seams open, so that the seams lay nice and flat, and it sets the seam. And whilst I was doing that, I also added some bias to the side seam to prepare that for when I start sewing that next. But actually it looks really nice now, doesn't it? So turn the cloth inside out and match up the underarm seams and the side seam. There is an order to how we're going to sew this now. So we're going to sew the underarm first. So match up the underarm pieces so that they are lined up exactly, and put lots of pins in. What we will do is we will start sewing from the bicep to the underarm, as we can see in the direction here. So we start sewing outwards and we work inwards to the underarm. Same thing as before, put lots of pins in. That way that you know that the fabric is going to be held together really well and it's not going to move when you start sewing. That's the important thing. And you're also thinking about the direction that you're going to sew. You're thinking about how you're going to finish that final seam there. That's what I'm thinking about. So I biased it as one whole piece together because it was the underarm, and I know that because it's a voluminous underarm, it's not gonna be any close to skin, so it's not going to affect me in any way. And here's what the finished result looks like. So this is where we're up to so far, and it already looks like a kimono. So let's work on the collar. That's the next job. So put the kimono out the way. Grab your collar piece, which is the long piece of fabric. It's the same length, or rather the full length of the whole collar. So the collar piece should be folded in half. You've got a halfway line there as a guide. And what we're going to do is the two outer pieces of the collar, we're going to fold those the raw edges in. And this way the collar has a clean finish when it's attached to the bodice. So use your ruler, measure 1 centimetre, fold that in, and then give that a press for me. And we're going to start from the middle of the collar and use the halfway mark of the collar piece. So it's going to be right sides to right sides. Use the 1 centimetre line that you've pressed as a guide to help you be able to line the two pieces of fabric together and pin them really well. So pin all the way down one side and then pin all the way down the other side. And the idea is here that you will sew a 1 centimetre seam to hold one side of the collar in place. You will iron the seam inwards, and then when you add your second piece of collar, as you close it in to give it that clean finish, you will then run a top stitch. Or what you could do is you could run a hand stitch, like a whip stitch, on top of the collar, and that way none of the stitching is seen and you've got 100% clean finish, and it looks really neat and tidy. So for the hem, which is the next piece that we're going to start working on, you've got the option really. I tend to turn my hems up at about either 1 inch or 3 centimetres. So the average trouser hem is turned up 3 centimetres. Most garments in shops are turned up 1 centimetre. On this occasion, because the kimono isn't that long, I decided to turn it up 1 inch, and that would just give me a nice clean finish. I've already biased around the edge to prepare it, so I'm going to turn it up 1 inch. I'm going to pin, and then I'm going to run a top stitch. And once again, you've also got the option here. You could run a whip stitch, or you could run a small ladder stitch if you wanted to have a clean finish with no visible seam on the outside. So to deal with the corners, the bottom corners of the kimono, what I do is I turn up my seam allowance on the hem, and here you can see I've just unpinned the collar slightly, just so that I can turn all the hem up at the corner, my 1 inch, and then what I'll basically do is I will tuck it all inside and it will all be stitched as one, so it looks really nice on the outside. So the collar's got a nice clean finish, and the hem's got a nice finish. And really what you want is for the kimono to look as beautiful on the inside as it is on the outside as well. So we've finished really our kimono. It's just final bits and pieces, little bits for me to show you some photographs of the finished kimono. And I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I did making it, because I know the other one got loads of views. Everybody really welcomed it. So please leave me a like, leave me a share, and send a comment, and it would be so nice to see what you've made. Bye for now.